BibleWorm, reading the Bible with BibleWorm.
Welcome to BibleWorm, getting to the core of the biblical text. I'm Dr. Amy Robertson, Director of Lifelong Learning and Music at Congregation Or Hadash in Sandy Springs, Georgia.
And I'm Dr. Robert Williamson, Professor of Religious Studies at Hendrix College and Theologian in Residence of Canvas Community in Little Rock, Arkansas. We're here every week to discuss the biblical text, both as biblical scholars and as people of faith, one Jewish and one Christian.
This week, we begin the Gospel of Mark. We'll read Mark chapter 1, verses 1 through 20. Mark sets the stage by telling his readers that this is good news, though we will see even in these first 20 verses that we're not talking about a puppies and cotton candy kind of good. We're talking about a deeper good, a harder one that involves significant struggle for everyone who pursues it, all the way up to the proverbial C-suite. But oh, it's such an empowering good. When we read how the heavens respond to Jesus' baptism, we have to wonder, what if we took seriously the possibility that the events here on earth can reverberate in the heavens, maybe even change the course of things? What if we took seriously the invitations that we ourselves encounter to reorient our actions toward a horizon other than whatever the empire has laid before us? What would be possible? Thanks for being with us. Hey, Bobby. It's good to see you.
Hey, Amy, it's good to see you too. It's your birthday. Happy birthday.
Woo! I have a wild adult birthday planned. Oh, adult birthday just put a whole other lens on that.
It did. We can't talk about that on the Bible Word.
I know.
Adult birthday is like you wear sweatpants and sit around and eat cake.
No, adult birthday is like you clean the house and go to work.
Oh,
like
yeah.
that's adult birthday.
Yeah.
That's
really sad.
Adult birthday. Okay, but here's the best part of my birthday so far. I'm sure the podcast will beat it, but it's going to be hard.
Yeah.
I talked to my dad, who is 77 and about 135 pounds. Uh-huh. And he said he has entered some powerlifting competitions.
Yeah.
He is very strong. Like, he's in great shape. And he's like, I think I could set some records. Like, there's one that if I could get down to 130, I could, whatever. So he's so excited about this. And then at the end of the call, he was like, I have to go because I'm going to be coached. And he was like, this gym, Amy, it is far away and it is not a nice gym. This is not Jack LaLanne. This is like, it is dirty and there's no locker room. And it's just you and some weights. And I got to go. That's awesome. Where I'm going.
Yeah.
And I'm like, his sheer delight at
That's amazing.
This new activity, which is, it makes me so, so happy. I'm so happy. And I hope he sets world records in powerlifting because that would be the greatest thing ever.
Is it the sort of thing where, so he's got a weight class. Is there also like an age category?
Yeah. So like for his age and his weight. Well, that's why he's like, this is my time.
130 pound, 77-year-old weightlifter. Like, that's got to be a fairly small category.
I mean, yeah. He's always liked lifting weights, but it does get easier. As he said, like, it's easier to win races when you're really old because no one else your age is running.
Yeah.
That has been just like basking in his delight has been the greatest. Yes. Gift to me so far, even better than cleaning the kitchen, which is its own gift. But
it is its own gift.
Is it?
I can't believe you have to clean your own kitchen on your birthday.
It's horrible. Adulthood is the worst. Why do we do this?
My daughter's been on this kick. I mean, I was like this when I was a kid too, but she's like, adults get to do whatever they want, whenever they want. And I'm like, baby girl, adulthood is basically doing a bunch of things you don't actually want to do.
Yeah.
And then every once in a while, you get to record a podcast.
Yeah. Let's record a podcast.
Let's do it.
Bobby,
exercise our free will.
We're starting a new book today.
We are.
I mean, we're starting the gospel that we're going to. Okay, it's kind of old, but okay, fine. We're starting the gospel that we will be reading this season in near entirety.
Yes.
which is the Gospel of Mark. We've been in the New Testament for a couple weeks, for a minute, well, for a week, and then for Christmas Eve.
Right.
But we were reading Luke because Mark ain't got no baby Jesus. And so
No baby Jesus. No.
So it's not a good, Christmas text.
Terrible Christmas text.
The worst Christmas text. No, I'm sure there's a worse one. So as we transition into Mark, what should we have in mind? I know you can't just give us a whole history of a whole gospel on one foot, but what would you want us to know?
Well, a couple of weeks ago I think it was the Zechariah text, I sort of gave an introduction to the Roman period in Judea in the context of the Gospels. So I won't do that again, but that's sort of a background here. We're in a period of Roman occupation of Judea, which I think is actually important to at least my reading of Mark's Gospel. And the Gospel is set in around Jesus died around the year 30 maybe. So the setting of the Gospel is about the year 30. Most scholars think that the Gospel of Mark was the first of the Gospels that we have to have been written. Maybe there were some other things around before Mark that have been lost in the sands of time, but of the canonical Gospels, Mark is the oldest one. And most scholars will date it either to just before or just after the Roman destruction of the temple in the year 70. Whichever place that you date it, the context in which it's being written is the context of Jewish revolt against Rome and a vicious Roman suppression. The revolt lasted 4 years, was fairly substantial, and it resulted in the destruction of Jerusalem and the destruction of the temple. And so that's sort of hovering in the background, even though Mark is telling the story of things that happened 40 years earlier. He can't help but tell it against the backdrop of his own time.
Of course, of where he is right in that moment, because we understand that events of the past in light of the life we're living.
Exactly. Exactly.
That's how it goes.
Mark is kind of famously bad at Greek. So his Greek is very...
a man of my own heart.
Yes,
I'm also famously bad at Greek.
His Greek is very sort of functional, right? He doesn't talk in flowery language. And so oftentimes, if Matthew and Luke tell the same story as Mark, they will sort of massage his Greek a little bit and make it prettier. That said, Mark is also understood as being a brilliant storyteller. So I sort of imagine him, this gospel makes the most sense to me if I think of it as originally an oral tradition that you could imagine people sitting around the campfire and the author of Mark is saying, let me tell you this story about Jesus. The pacing of it, the way he uses references back and forth between stories. He's sort of famous for patterns of 3, or telling one story and then interrupting it to tell a whole different story and then coming back to the first story. He's got these narrative techniques that we know from sort of other storytelling cultures that are pretty interesting to pay attention to. So brilliant storyteller, not a great flowery writer. Anyway, that's some things about Mark. There's probably other things we could or should say.
Well, there's always more one could say, but one has limited time.
That is true.
Okay, can I ask you one? I think this is a remedial question. I'm famous for the remedial questions in the New Testament. If Mark's Greek is famously not so great, what do we imagine Greek was his primary language, or he spoke Aramaic, or do you have any idea?
There is an argument about that in the literature. Most people agree that the gospel itself was originally written in Greek, that it is not a translation of an Aramaic document. The question of whether the author was a native Aramaic speaker who was writing in Greek is sort of an open question.
Got it.
He does use a fair amount of, a lot of his sentences start with and this, and that, which as you well know in Hebrew narrative, that's kind of the way that things are often constructed.
Yeah.
And so maybe he's writing that way. He does explain from time to time. He'll say something in Aramaic and then he'll explain what it means to his Greek audience. And so he's doing a little bit of this translation work back and forth. So he at least is familiar enough with Aramaic to know how to make the translational moves. So I think it's kind of interesting to think of him as Greek as a second language sort of speaker.
It'd be like if I tried to write a very important story for history in French.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
No, he probably does better than I would do in that.
I think he actually does really quite amazingly well. Yes. I don't mean to give Mark a hard time, but
Yeah. Well, our reading today is Mark chapter 1, verses 1 through 20.
Yes.
Which is a lot of verses. So I think we should just go ahead and start.
I think so. Let's do it.
So I'm reading from the NRSV. Bobby, I know you usually look at the Common English Bible.
Yes.
So you should listen carefully because I know that my translation is very different at the beginning. So
interesting.
Listen. Not very different. It's different to me in ways that feel important to me.
Okay. Now I'm so intrigued. I did not know this.
Okay. Verse 1. The beginning of the good news of Jesus Christ, the Son of God. As it is written in the prophet Isaiah, "See, I am sending my messenger ahead of you, who will prepare your way. The voice of one crying out in the wilderness, prepare the way of the Lord, make his paths straight." John the Baptizer appeared in the wilderness, proclaiming a baptism of repentance for the forgiveness of sins. Okay, I know you're going to say I shouldn't stop there, but I have to stop there because that's like one sentence.
Yeah.
I mean, it has the little introduction, is one sentence. But I want to diagram that sentence. It starts, as it is written in the prophet Isaiah, and then the subject of the sentence doesn't start until 2 verses later. John the Baptizer.
That is so interesting.
I know you're looking at a different translation, but do you have anything to say or any particular thoughts about like how the different parts of this sentence or this thought are related to each other? Like it just covers so much. It covers so much ground.
It covers so much ground. Yes. No, when you kept reading into that verse 4, I was like, why did you keep reading? Like there's so much to talk about. And Mark wants us to have it all at once. Like you got to know all this in one breath.
Yes.
I'm so fascinated thinking about that.
Yeah. And he's got he's like in between the commas, like in these like dependent phrases, these little, like if I want to diagram this.
Yes.
My son is 17 and is very tall. And sometimes he likes to remind us how tall he is by taking all the stairs in one step.
Whoa.
Like taking one giant step.
Like 8 feet tall? How tall is that guy?
Well, it's not like we have 25 stairs. But he likes to, flaunt a little bit. But that's the image I keep getting in my head starting this. Like, we have somewhere to go, and we are going.
Yes. I think that's exactly right. And Mark sort of has a reputation of breathlessness. And so I appreciate you're sort of pulling that out. And immediately, here, this thing happened. Like, it has an urgency about it.
Yes.
The content of it, he's telling us immediately, like in that first phrase, this is the beginning of the good news. So we know it's gospel. We know it's got to be good news. We've talked before about the fact that euangelion is a thing that the Roman Empire used to talk about great things that happened in the empire. It's to announce like things that the emperor has done that have changed or preserved the world as we know it. Here, that phrase is being applied to the gospel. It is also saying this thing you're about to hear, which, spoiler alert, ends in a crucifixion, is good news, right? And so the story you're about to get, this is good news for the world, even though the story itself is going to be really complicated. Yeah. Then you get the title Christ, which is, is the Messiah, and you get the title Son of God, which is so much you can do with that. And we haven't even gotten to the first comma yet.
That's exactly right. And all of this is like the background that he wants you to have in your mind before you arrive at the subject of the subject of the sentence, John.
Which turns out to be John, which sort of like a little bit of a head fake because you think here's the good news of Jesus, and then by the way, we're starting with John. contextualized within that passage, which is mostly from Isaiah 40.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about Son of God? Like what that title might mean?
Yeah. Oh, sure. Yeah. Here's how it resonates for me. I am pretty sure that there are places maybe in Psalms where Son of God is not meant literally in any way, but is a reference to the king. Like King
Right.
David has a special relationship to God. And in some, we know that in some other ancient Near Eastern cultures, there is this sense of like a very, very, very clear connection between king and God that borders on king being
Yes.
having some divineness about them. I don't see that in the Hebrew Bible use of this phrase, but for me it evokes that kind of the chosen king, the chosen leader.
I think for readers who are not familiar with the Hebrew scriptures, Son of God immediately sounds like a declaration of the divine status of Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
But I think you're exactly right. For readers of the Hebrew scripture and for a Jewish audience, which at least Mark's audience seems to be, part of the audience seems to be Jewish, it would not have that resonance immediately. It would have the resonance of like one with a special relationship to God and somebody in a position of authority. In a Roman context, Caesar was thought of as the son of the gods.
Mm-hmm.
And so it can be read, if you read it in the Roman context, as either a comparison between Jesus and the emperor, or even a dig at the emperor to say like this is the actual Son of God, in which case there is an ontological divine status being claimed there.
Mm-hmm.
So there's so much contained in that one phrase. There is a debate about whether or not Mark's gospel thinks of Jesus as a divine being. And that's a whole complicated argument, and I think that maybe it does at the end of the day. But it is very different than a gospel like John, in which we've seen a couple of years ago, Jesus is saying, the Father and I are one, or the gospel is telling us that Jesus pre-existed as the Word in the primordial times. Mark's gospel is much softer about Jesus' divine status, and I think can actually be read productively, thinking of Jesus not as actually being divine at all. That's at least not the most important thing to Mark.
Gosh, there's so many resonances we could pull out. I want to just touch briefly on this prophetic text that we've mentioned already, that is contained within verses 2 and 3. And it says in the text, it is from the prophet Isaiah.
Yes.
The second part of it is from the prophet Isaiah. The very first line is actually from Malachi. And yet my messenger, that is the word Malachi. Like that's in Hebrew, that's what that is. And in Malachi, it says, "See, I am sending my messenger ahead of me," because it's God speaking in Malachi. Here it is changed to you, but then it's bumped up against this text from Isaiah 40 about preparing the way. So I think it's still the same reference, right? That you're preparing the way for the Lord, whatever that means.
Yes.
And I think it's really artful the way that Mark has chosen these two prophetic texts that both have this kind of, again, like this forward motion, like something is starting, something is happening. We are moving down a path, and there is momentum in this text already.
When you read that way that Mark has taken that prophecy and played with it, and it says before you, do you read that as you, dear reader, or do you read that as you, Jesus, who we just mentioned in the previous verse? Who's being addressed there, do you think?
Before I went back and looked at the Malachi quote and saw that in that context, it's me, I think when you first encounter it, like just the beginning of verse 2, I think it's not clear who it is. I'm sending my messenger ahead of you. I don't know who that is. But then when he puts it together with verse 3 that says, "Prepare the way of the Lord,"
right?
That suggests to me that, we have "prepare your way," put in parallel with "prepare the way of the Lord." So I think that he is referring to the Lord in And what exactly does that mean? We don't quite know yet.
Yes. I like that. So it's sort of a talking almost to Jesus, saying this messenger John is going to prepare your way and you are the Lord. I like that. I also think you could hear, you hear yourself in there as a reader. Whenever somebody says you're like, me? Mine?
Yeah.
And so
Moi?
maybe there's a secondary reading too, where you sort of see yourself included in there, that the way has been prepared for you. That's actually sort of the way we talked about that in Isaiah 40, actually. Is
how I usually read it in Isaiah 40, yes.
And we had, in that episode, as I recall, we talked about preparing the way for God is also preparing a way. Once the king's highway is prepared, it is a highway that other people can also use. And so maybe these are not two separate options, but are sort of sequential to one another or something like that.
Yeah. Okay, we need to push forward, and we will. We're going to learn a little bit more about baptism in a minute, but we just in verse 4 encountered, now that we have a person, John the Baptizer, who is baptizing. But what does that mean at this? How do you understand that at this time in history?
That is such a complicated question, Amy. And I don't know that the answer... No. I mean, it's exactly the right question. I just mean it does not have a, here's the answer, put it on a multiple choice test, and that's the one. It has resonances, as you know, with purification rituals in Judaism, the mikveh, and so forth. So sometimes that is one frame in which people put it. There is also, in other forms of Judaism in this period, like the sectarians at Qumran, baptism was used as basically as an initiation rite. When you join the community, you have a baptism that marks your transition from not being part of the community to being part of the community. Those two ways of understanding it are not entirely distinct, although the sort of more mainstream Jewish tradition, as I understand it, the purification is an ongoing process.
It's an ongoing process, but the way I think about it, as you're saying, is really like they are marking a transition in your state of being in some way. And so it could relate to something in your body, something physical, or it could relate to conversion, or it could relate to joining a new community. But it's sort of marking like
I like that.
Yeah, something is shifting.
Well, the way the CEB has it, which is a little loose, but I think is actually a really nice way of getting at the sense of it. People were being baptized to show that they were changing their hearts and lives and wanted God to forgive their sins. And so I think it does have that sense of change of one's state. I think it does have the sense of somehow being cleansed of some impurifications that you have carried in your body. I think it does have the sense of initiation into a new way of life. The way that I frame it for myself is that these folks have been living a life in the Roman Empire, and they have sort of lived by the values of the empire, maybe also living out the values of their religious background and not recognizing that there is a conflict sometimes between those two, as is also true of many of us who live in our culture and live out our religion and think they go together when maybe they don't. And so one of the ways I think about this is John calling people away from simplistic loyalty to the empire and saying, no, you've got to stop living that way and recommit yourself to the values of the religious tradition, which in John's case is Judaism, saying this is a call back to the Torah and recognizing that we have not been living that way, but we can yet still live that way. And so this marks that move. That's kind of how I get to it. Would you nuance that differently or add something? Or?
No, I mean, I think that makes a lot of sense, and it's in keeping with what I understand this ritual, how I understand it to be functioning at that time and still today. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense.
Hi everyone, it's Bobby here from BibleWorm. We hope you're enjoying the podcast. Amy and I started BibleWorm a couple of years ago because we wanted to create a space where we could talk deeply about the Bible in ways that bring together our academic backgrounds in biblical studies and our deep engagement with communities and people of faith. We decided to make this resource free because we want everyone to have access to sound biblical scholarship that connects biblical faith to everyday life. We hope you're finding the podcast fits that need. That said, while the podcast is free, making it is not. Amy and I and the rest of Team BibleWorm spend a lot of time and energy studying, recording, and editing the podcast to make it freely available to the public. If you enjoyed the podcast, and if you find yourself in a position to support our work, we hope that you will consider becoming a BibleWorm supporter for as little as $4 per month. For a bit more, you can also get early access to episodes, weekly liturgies, video Bible studies, join a monthly discussion group, and more. We realize not everyone is in a position to support the podcast, but if you appreciate our work and want to support us, we hope you'll check out our Patreon at patreon.com/BibleWormPodcast for more details. Thanks so much for listening, and now back to this week's podcast.
Okay, can I pick us up?
Yes, please.
So I'm picking up in verse 5 in one of these sentences that famously starts with "and," as you pointed out before. And people from the whole Judean countryside and all the people of Jerusalem were going out to him and were baptized by him in the river Jordan, confessing their sins. Now John was clothed with camel's hair, with a leather belt around his waist, and he ate locusts and wild honey. He proclaimed, "The one who is more powerful than I is coming after me. I am not worthy to stoop down and untie the thong of his sandals. I have baptized you with water, but he will baptize you with the Holy Spirit." Okay, I don't want to linger on this too long, but I do for sure want to pull out another connection to the Jewish tradition, the Hebrew Bible tradition, that is evoked from the way that he's describing John. Mm-hmm. So if this were like a guess who game, you know those games where you like have little cards stuck on your head and someone has to describe who's on your little forehead card? Okay, so I've described the guy. Who's on the little forehead card, Bobby? Who is John supposed to evoke?
Elijah!
Yeah, Elijah's a woodsy guy too.
Yes.
Yes, is described in very similar terms. Why are we talking about Elijah?
I think we're talking about Elijah because of Malachi, which talks about Elijah as sort of heralding the arrival of the Messiah. Mm-hmm. Elijah, as you well know, in 2 Kings 3, he doesn't die at the end of his life, but he's transported into the heavens via a fiery chariot, which is where we get the song, "Swing Low, Sweet Chariot." Mm-hmm. And he's carried bodily up into heaven, and so it's understood in the tradition that Elijah has not died, and so that Elijah is fully capable of returning. Mm-hmm. And so by having this reference to John the Baptist as the messenger who looks like Elijah, we've sort of established this connection that here comes John in the way that we've been expecting Elijah, which means the Messiah is about to come onto the scene. Mm-hmm. That's how I put it together. Mm-hmm. Is that how you would put it together?
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's how I put it together. Do you think it's strange that he doesn't, I don't know how he would subtly name drop Elijah in here, but his audience has got to be pretty literate to pick up what he's laying down.
Yes.
Maybe literate's the wrong word, but it just makes me wonder about his audience, I guess.
Yes. I mean, this is maybe a weird analogy, but I have young children, and so I watch a lot of television that is designed for young children. Mm-hmm. But oftentimes it's working on another level because it knows that adults are watching it.
The good shows work on both levels.
Bluey, yes. And so I wonder but it totally, the shows make complete sense to my kids, even though they're missing a whole other level. And so I kind of wonder if this is a little bit that. Like you could hear this and be like, hey, there's a woodsy dude who's eating grasshoppers. Yeah. That's kind of cool. Yeah. And then if those who have ears to hear are like, that's Elijah. And but at the very least, I think you're exactly right that some of Mark's audience is knows enough about the
Mhm.
Hebrew Bible, the Jewish tradition, that they're picking up all these references. And
I love that point, Bobby, because even if you don't know this is Elijah and you're not picking up any of those references, what you know about John is like he is not living in like the penthouse apartment in some, Roman center of economic power. Like the man's eating bugs in the woods.
yes,
So at least we know that
yes.
about him.
And that's important, I think, because John is calling people to a different way of life, which is in some way wilderness life. And maybe he's not calling people out to, eat grasshoppers, but I do think that there's something that communicates about the possibility of living this kind of life that John is calling you to means separating yourself in some sort of a way from the urban life, from the imperial life, and making some sort of radical life choices that we might not immediately be prepared to make.
Yeah. Okay, I have one other thought on this. Again, I just am so captivated by how even now, like the beginning of this reading we did, pushed us forward so fast.
Yes.
And then we landed on John for a moment. And so I was like, okay, John, got it. And then John's like, no, not me.
Yeah.
Like, we're still pointing forward.
Yes.
You're not there yet. I'm not the landing place. There's not really a question there. I just love it.
So John is important, but he is not the final stop on the important
Right, we're not
train.
stopping here.
Yeah.
Right, this was
and
just
so he's pointing to one. You think this is a thing that you're doing, like this is a commitment that you're making, but there's yet another one, and there's a sense of the amplification of what's coming next. Baptism with water, baptism with the Holy Spirit. I think that idea there that in some way Jesus is going to bring a spirit from the divine that's going to make yet another sort of transition in people's commitments to the way of God.
Yeah.
The other thing that's important to me there is that in verse 5, it's everyone in Judea and all the people of Jerusalem. So it is easy to get confused here and think that John is sort of baptizing people away from their one religious tradition into some other new religious tradition, maybe pulling people away from Judaism into Christianity. But Christianity doesn't exist in this moment.
Yeah,
right?
That's not what's happening.
And it is very much that people who are Jewish are coming out to John to sort of recommit to being Jewish in a way that's sort of going back to the roots, right? So maybe we've lost touch with the core, maybe we've lost touch with the Torah way of life. So they're recommitting themselves to that. And that's the precursor for what Jesus' ministry is going to be, which is not pulling people away into something else, but making people recommit to what has already been for a long time.
Yeah. I mean, and we need to do that all the time. The world is a wildly distracting place.
It is. It is so much so. Yeah.
All right. Are you ready to move on?
I think so.
Okay. Then I'm going to pick up in verse 9. In those days, Jesus came from Nazareth of Galilee and was baptized by John in the Jordan. And just as he was coming up out of the water, he saw the heavens torn apart and the Spirit descending like a dove on him. And a voice came from heaven, "You are my Son, the Beloved. With you I am well pleased." And the Spirit immediately drove him out into the wilderness. He was in the wilderness 40 days, tempted by Satan, and he was with the wild beasts, and the angels waited on him. This got real trippy.
It did. Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Is Jesus just like a regular guy when this begins? Or like I leave my question there. Is Jesus a regular guy?
We do not know in Mark's gospel. In the other gospels, we have known since Jesus was a baby that he is not just a regular guy.
Yeah.
Mark has chosen to tell us the story of Jesus without telling us any of that. And so whether we take that to mean Jesus is just a regular guy, or whether we take that to mean his special status is not important in this moment, I don't know. But Mark clearly thinks we can tell the story of Jesus without all that background. There were early Christians, sometimes called adoptionists, who believed that Jesus was a righteous person who then was adopted as God's son in this moment, actually, at the baptism. And so Mark's gospel was important to them because they said, look, he's a human being whom God has now claimed as God's own.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's entirely possible to read Mark's gospel that way. I think it's also entirely possible, as most Christians will do today, to say Jesus was already important, already the Son of God, already all of these things, and yet he comes to this moment of baptism.
So if one thinks about it the second way, sort of
Mhm.
bringing in what we've learned from other gospels about Jesus's birth and childhood, why does he need to be baptized?
Yeah.
By John, no less, who has said there's someone coming, more powerful than him.
Right. Yeah. He just said, this one who is coming, I'm not even worthy to loosen the strap of his sandals. I couldn't even untie that guy's shoes.
Yeah.
And now here he is saying, baptize me, which indicates some sense that the one doing the baptism is, at least in that moment, superior might not be exactly the right word, but officially more important on the hierarchy than the one being baptized. And so it's an uncomfortable sort of statement.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We read Matthew's version of this last year, and Matthew sort of famously has John say, oh, no, I couldn't possibly baptize you, Jesus. And then Jesus says, no, you have to fulfill all righteousness.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't get that in Mark's gospel, and which probably means Matthew read Mark's gospel and was really uncomfortable with it, as we might be as well. The way that I read it is, this is Jesus sort of submitting himself publicly to this idea that one, no matter who you are, needs to make a public recommitment to following the kingdom of heaven, the way of the Torah, over and against the way that you have previously been living, which is in the logic of the empire. And so for me, this marks a transition in Jesus's own life between being somebody who's living the way that is given to him. I mean, not to say that he wasn't a Torah follower or whatever, but that his life was not visibly different until this moment when he sort of recommits himself or publicly recommits himself. And then everybody can see, oh, here, even Jesus has to make this commitment. And that marks the beginning of Jesus really trying to live out the kingdom of heaven here and now. I think I'm sure there are other ways of getting at that, but that's sort of how I have come to read it.
Bobby, when people are baptized now, is it in any way this sort of like, the phrase in my mind is like imitatio Dei? Like, do they do it because Jesus did it or no?
That is such a good question. We definitely remember that, there's a baptism of the Lord Sunday, which is in early January, where we remember and we recall our baptisms in light of Jesus's baptism.
Mm-hmm.
In the baptism liturgies that I can think of, Jesus's baptism isn't the first thing we think about. It's sort of Paul's discussion in the letters about baptism, and those who believe are baptized in the sort of washing away of sin and death to one world and resurrection in another world or something like that. And I guess the Jesus story is in the background if you know it, but it's usually not first and foremost.
Yeah.
So we don't say, like when we celebrate the Lord's Supper, we say, Jesus did this on the night he was arrested, and so therefore we do it too.
So that's why we're doing it, yeah.
Baptism, we do not say that so explicitly, at least in my tradition.
Okay, I want to talk about this incredible moment of the heavens tearing apart.
Yes.
I don't even know what to say about it. Just like sitting with the thought that the action of, I'm going to call Jesus a person here, but I know that's a little complicated, but like that an action that can happen on earth can have that kind of reverberation and like reflection in heaven is just so beautiful.
It is really beautiful. Yes.
Do you have anything else to say about that? Do you have something smarter to say about that?
No. I love that.
That's really nice.
It really is beautiful. There is a thinness between heaven and earth that occurs in the moment of the baptism of Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're in the context of this being called into a different way of life. And here the sort of reference point for that different way of life is made abundantly clear to us as readers, that this is the heavenly way. This is baptism into the heavenly realm, or the way of the kingdom of heaven. And it's right now, it's in that person of Jesus. I love your observation that it's a human action, John's baptizing of Jesus, that evokes this response in the heavens. I love thinking about the directionality of it that way.
Mm-hmm.
And to extrapolate beyond Jesus and to say, yes, like other things that other humans do, heaven responds, or at least could respond to those as well. We talked a couple of weeks ago about the Gabriel's announcement of the birth of John to Zechariah as being a response to Zechariah's prayer. And there we saw the heavens responding to human action. Here we see it again. And so I really love that idea.
Yeah.
The other thing that's happening in Mark's version of this story, which is different than what happens in some other versions, is it says, Jesus saw heaven splitting open, and the Spirit said to him, "You are my son." And so the impression that you get, if you just read this story absent the other Gospels, is that Jesus has had this experience, but maybe no one else around him has actually seen any of this.
Yes.
That the baptism shows Jesus heaven, the Spirit comes on him, he realizes his belovedness, but it's still a secret from everyone around. We know as readers because we got to read it, but the people, on those shores of the Jordan have no idea that any of this has happened, and Jesus' identity remains mysterious to them for a long time.
What a sort of secret to hold.
Yeah.
Especially because immediately afterwards, he's driven into the wilderness and tempted by Satan. Also by himself, as far as I can tell from the text. Well, he has the angels and the wild beasts.
That contrast between, I love verse 11 so much, and the way it's translated in the CEB, "You are my son, whom I dearly love. In you I find happiness." I love the way they phrase that last bit, that God is sort of finding delight in Jesus.
Yeah.
You don't often think of God as being delighted with things. At least, I mean, you don't see that language too often. And here God is happy. And then immediately the result of that is like, bam, out you go into the wilderness.
Okay, first, I seriously thought you were going to say that this delight reminded you of my dad's delight at powerlifting, which would have really been a different direction to take it.
A different direction to go, but yes.
In some ways, it almost fits in together with the directionality that you were just talking about. I have in my mind, for whatever reason, this expectation that things unfold according to God's plan. God is driving when things happen, and God causes things to happen to us. And we see in these texts a reversal of that on several occasions. And similarly, I don't think of us as having the capacity to delight God.
Yes.
Whereas God could bring us delight. And again, this reverses that. There's I don't know, more of a back and forth, or a mutuality, or some kind of, it complexifies that relationship a little bit in a really lovely way.
It is. I appreciate your saying it that way. Yeah.
So why the wilderness and Satan?
Yeah. And it's not that Satan grabbed Jesus and forced him into the wilderness. It's that the Spirit, Holy Spirit, forced Jesus into the wilderness. And you almost get the sense of like, even yet while the voice was still lingering in the air that said, "You are beloved," Jesus is like, shoof. It's a stark,
stark is a good word.
Yeah, shocking. Mm-hmm. The way that I read it is this way of life into which Jesus has been baptized is not an easy way of life. And it is one that drives you sometimes away from the centers of things into difficult places where you have to wrestle with the things that tempt you. And this is a recognition that the way of life given to us by God, the kingdom of heaven, the Torah, is not a natural way that is just easy peasy, but it's like a decision that you constantly have to make and remake, and it sometimes feels like you're all alone in the wilderness. Yeah. And that's true of Jesus, That's true of us. And so even though we have said this is good news, even though we have said Jesus is dearly loved, yet here he is in the wilderness being tempted. And so why would you and I think it's going to be any different for us? I don't know that. Like, you have to squint just right for that to be good news, right? But that seems to be what it is.
Yeah.
What do you do with the wilderness?
I want to throw in a reference to the Exodus there, but
Yes.
I almost don't even want to pull it out too long, because I feel like once you pull it out, you're like, oh yeah, right. Another situation in which the chosen beloved one of God is in the wilderness for, in that case, 40 years.
Yes.
And is, I know that Jews and Christians sometimes have some disagreement about who is the suffering servant.
Yeah.
But I know that the Jewish experience through history has sometimes been that to be chosen by God entails a lot of struggle.
Yes.
As it does certainly in this text.
I think that is also the message of Mark's gospel. Not the only one, but I think that is a message of Mark's gospel, and many Christians therefore resist Mark's gospel because it's exactly connecting following God with the possibility of struggle. And we don't want to think about that.
Right. And it's good news, but it's not good news like a balloon display in a birthday party good news.
Yeah.
Like, it's not cotton candy good news.
Yeah.
I don't like cotton candy. It's too much for me. So, that's fine. But I had another thought as you were talking, Bobby, and you said something about Jesus going into the wilderness to deal with Jesus's own temptations, And I was thinking actually about a Jewish text that I read recently related to the story of Jacob and Esau. And when Jacob and Esau, they're brothers who have separated after much strife and are about to encounter each other again. And Jacob is afraid that maybe Esau will try to kill him. And then there's this strange scene where Jacob wrestles with an angel.
Yeah.
An angel, maybe, something. We're not quite sure what is happening. And this reading that I found so compelling was that Jacob had to wrestle with his own stuff before he could encounter his brother, lest he project all of it onto, like, you just can't you can't move through the complexities of the world unless you deal with your stuff.
I think that's a beautiful connection. And of course, we read that text earlier this year. And so that text is in the background, also in the sort of narrative lectionary trajectory. You and I also talk with some frequency about, as difficult as the wilderness period was for Israel, Moses, when we get to Deuteronomy, is really concerned that it was actually easier in some way to be dependent on God in the wilderness. And the real challenge is when you get to the promised land flowing with milk and honey, how are you going to handle that?
Yes.
And I think that text is here too. If you've got to be able to handle the temptation in the wilderness before you can go back to this place that is so abundant and so luxurious, and there's so much possibility, and still be true to your values.
Yes, and to go back into the world where you can be deluded into thinking that you are independently in control of what's happening, and you are making everything happen. Whereas in the wilderness, the angels waited on him. I don't know what exactly that means, but there is a sense of vulnerability that is really in your face. You are aware of your vulnerability in the wilderness.
The angels are also so important there, and I tend to skip past them, but it's not that Jesus is alone in the wilderness. It's that he's alone in the wilderness, and then there are angels who take care of him.
Yeah.
And so God doesn't just abandon you in the wilderness, but it might feel like that for a time.
Yes, but you're right. That is not what's happened. Is there anything else you would like to draw out from this section?
I don't think so.
All right, then I'm going to take us to the end, picking up in verse 14. Now, after John was arrested, Jesus came to Galilee, proclaiming the good news of God and saying, "The time is fulfilled and the kingdom of God has come near. Repent and believe in the good news." As Jesus passed along the Sea of Galilee, he saw Simon and his brother Andrew casting a net into the sea, for they were fishermen. And Jesus said to them, "Follow me, and I will make you fish for people." And immediately they left their nets and followed him. As he went a little farther, he saw James, son of Zebedee, and his brother John, who were in their boat mending the nets. Immediately he called them, and they left their father Zebedee in the boat with the hired men and followed him.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, here's yet another instance where Mark just goes so fast. Like, again, he's talked the fact that John was arrested, which seems like an important thing. It's just in this little dependent clause. Like,
Yes.
so we're not going to tell that part of the story,
Right.
but I'm just going to note that it has happened, but we're not going to draw it out. So I'm going to give you an option, Bobby. Do you want to draw it? You can either draw it out, or I would love to hear, like, why doesn't he say more about that?
So it's interesting. He drops it right here, and then he's going to come back and tell that story in Mark 6, which is way down the line.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so we'll actually talk about that in a few weeks on the podcast. Newly this year, I have discovered in year 2 of the narrative lectionary that Mark 6 text has been added in. And so he's sort of foreshadowing it here, but he doesn't want to talk about it right now. He just wants you to know that it happened. The way that I process it in this moment is, what we have is Jesus. We've said this is good news. Jesus has been baptized, told that he is dearly loved, goes out in the wilderness where he struggles for 40 days. John, who is the one who baptized him, is now arrested. Mm-hmm. And then Jesus says, trust the good news. And so we are messing with the notion of good news in the ways that you and I have been talking about, but the hits keep on coming, you know?
Yeah.
This good news is going to get you pushed into the wilderness. It's going to get you arrested. It's going to get you in trouble. And yet it is still emphatically good news. The kingdom is coming. Commit yourself to this way of life. It's going to get you arrested. It's going to get you tempted. Spoiler alert, it might get you crucified. But here's the way of life that is on offer to you. So let's go. If you can hear that, I mean, it's an invitation. It is a challenge. It is this is not a cakewalk that we're getting ready to embark on. But this is the nature of the good news. That's sort of how I process it. What would you say about that?
I'm processing your processing.
Yeah.
One moment, please. I think that reframing of what it means for something to be good is so important. I mean, it's important for me, and it's important for the people of this time. Maybe it's important at every time.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder what you think. This phrase, kingdom of God,
Mm-hmm.
that's in verse 15.
Mm-hmm.
What do you well, how do you think people would have heard that? Or what do you think Mark is going for, or Jesus is going for? Is that this idea that the world as it should be, as described in the Torah, if all of the things were actually happening the way they should be, that is coming soon? Or does it have some other, some other thing it's pulling in your mind?
The way I read it is, not only is it coming soon, but it has now arrived in the ministry of Jesus. It has not fully arrived. The kingdom of Rome still has its power. If you look around, the kingdom of Rome has all the power. And yet here is this moment in which Jesus is saying, I am inviting you to participate in the kingdom of heaven here and now. You know what it looks like because we've been talking about it since Moses. And now it's possible to live that way differently because Jesus has arrived. And if you try to live that way, it's going to cause problems for you with the kingdom of Rome, which still very much is also present. But there's an invitation. Yeah.
Right. But that's okay. That is That is as it should be.
Right. And so then the baptism, this call to a different way of life, is exactly a call to live in the kingdom of heaven here and now, over and against living in the Roman Empire, even though they're overlapped.
Which is exactly the call then that, in my translation, Jesus says repent, which in my head I translate into Hebrew as, the verb to return, to turn, shuv, tshuva.
Yeah.
And so that pulls on sort of how it describes what the baptism was doing. And as you were saying before, it's not repent like you're such a terrible person and you should feel bad about yourself. It's go back to that godly way of being that we all know what it is. We're just not doing it because it's really hard.
That is so important, Amy. I love it when you remind me about that this is the sense of it is going back to your roots, going back to the way it's supposed to be. It's not, it is a new way of life, but the new way of life is a recommitment to something that is very old, and the sense in which it has been there. We have even achieved it from time to time. And so I like that simultaneous calling forward and also looking backwards for where we're headed. I think holding those two together is so important.
And then we get such an example of this turning, literal turning from what you're doing in the story of the fisherman.
Yeah.
I always, it makes me laugh every time I read the phrase fish. I will make you fish for people.
Yeah.
Can you just draw out for a moment, what do you think Jesus is going for in using that like phrase and speaking to fishermen and saying, I will make you fish for people? That's a weird thing to say.
It's a weird thing to say. And, I go back and forth about whether the fishing metaphor is the important part or whether it's the reconfiguring of the fisherman's skill set towards something related to humanity. That second way of thinking about it is where I am tending to land because I know how to get my head around it better. One of the things that is sometimes lost in this text, it's really subtle, is in verse 20, James and John leave their father Zebedee in the boat with the hired workers. Now, sometimes people think of the disciples of Jesus as having been like low-class fishermen. Mm-hmm. But in fact, they seem to have owned the fishing operation. And so their father is there with the men they hired to do the labor. They also did the labor, but they were like business owners. And so they're a little bit higher on the class scale.
Yeah.
The fishing industry in Galilee was an enormous moneymaker for the Roman Empire. And the taxes that were levied and all of those sorts of things, the places those fish were taken and sold, so much money flowing in that direction to the Roman Empire. And so one way of reading this is to say, take these skills that you have been putting to work in the making of money for the empire, and leave that behind and orient them toward orient them toward human beings in a way that makes a difference for those human beings.
Yeah.
Now, that metaphor results in people being treated like fish, which is like a whole other thing.
Right. We don't want to go too into the nitty-gritty of it. Yeah.
But if it's like, take the skill set that you can make money with and figure out how to use it for the good of humanity, that's what I think is the key point here.
No, I love that. I love the idea of taking your talents and your time and your limited days on earth and reorienting towards the thing that you thought was the goal is not actually the goal.
Yes.
The capitalist goal or the empire goal, whatever, however we want to describe it, you've done really well for yourself in that regard or done well enough for yourself. But that wasn't actually the right goal. So what happens now if you shift and devote all of your energy and talent towards this other thing?
And that turning back toward God is also a turning back toward humanity in the way that the Torah frames so nicely in Deuteronomy 6, love the Lord your God with all your heart and mind and soul, and Leviticus 19, love your neighbor, love the immigrant as yourself.
Mhm.
When you turn back toward God, you also turn back toward your fellow human being. And so this call to participate in the kingdom of heaven is now also a call to orient yourself towards people, not toward profit. Yes.
I like that much more than trap people.
Yeah.
Trap
People
people
are always
in a
like,
net.
do fish really want to be caught? Like, they probably would rather live their little fishy lives.
Yeah, probably so.
I'm sure they would. Like, yes.
Probably so. Mhm. Never interviewed a fish.
No. But, hey, would you like to get caught in a net and be eaten for supper? I'm pretty sure
Really,
the
just
answer
would
is
you like to be caught in a net? Mostly no.
mostly no. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I know people who have tried to unpack that metaphor and with more and less success. But to me, it's the metaphor. You can't take it too far.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think that's right.
Also, I don't know how to fish for fish, really, let alone fish for people. But if you say, like, can you use your skills as a Bible scholar or as a pastor or as a whatever skill set and figure out how to orient it toward human beings, like, absolutely, I can figure that out.
Yes.
So thinking of it that way actually makes it more relevant to me and also puts more pressure on me.
Yes.
Because, if it's like, can you go fish for people? I'm like, no.
Nope, cannot. Yeah, and I think it's so interesting and compelling that they go. They don't know who this guy is. They don't know he had a vision when he was baptized and, that he brings delight to God. He's just a guy.
No,
but there's
right.
something about what he says that suggests to them there is something more you could be doing. And
Yes.
I think a lot of us often have that sense when we get too caught up in the day-to-day doing of things.
Yeah.
That when someone says, shift your horizon and it will be better, you just know that that's true, even if you don't know what that means.
So, like, deep in your soul, you're kind of wishing someone would beckon you toward a different way of life.
Yeah. Give me a different option.
I love that. Then you can see yourself sort of as the one who is being called, right, as we were just talking about. But then you can also see yourself as it's always dangerous to see yourself as Jesus, but like as the one inviting people to the other way of life. It's not that you're trying to force people to do something they don't want to do, but you're trying to invite them into a possibility that they already wish for, but may not think is possible.
May need a nudge because there's a lot of outside pressure to stay in the path you're, on.
Yeah.
Oh, Bobby, there's lots of good stuff in here. What is rising up for you today?
I mean, in the way that I do when I read Mark, I feel like I've been saying the same thing over and over already since we started. But it's a good thing. I think that this is to me the sort of essence of gospel right here, which is that the arrival of Jesus on the scene is an invitation to an alternative way of life, which is here described as the kingdom of heaven, which has come near. And it is being offered as an alternative to the way of life of the kingdom of Rome. And we're being invited into it. The invitation is good news. The invitation is also that the powers that be might not see your participation in the kingdom of heaven as good news, and therefore it might be struggle for you. And nonetheless, this thing is human-oriented in a way that the logic of the empire is not human-oriented. So this way of life to which we are being invited is to put off the daily grind of our work on the boats and to say, I have been offered an opportunity to put my skills and my gifts and my talents to work on behalf of humanity. And so I'm going to go and do that. There's a lot of risk there, a risk that I think is really hard to take. And I am often like trying to take the risk while also, figuring out how to participate in the empire enough to have a retirement account and things like that.
Yeah.
It's a scary invitation, but it is also such a hopeful invitation to say we could, in returning to the way of life we are called to by God, both participate in the kingdom of heaven and live a life that has value for humanity. And that's what we're being invited to. Just seems like such a beautiful invitation, a challenge, but it's so much more than like, sometimes Christianity is like, if you believe in Jesus, you can go to heaven. Like, okay, I mean, all right, like that's good news, but like, if you follow Jesus here and now, you can participate in the kingdom of heaven today by turning your skills toward the well-being of your fellow human beings. That is such a more compelling invitation to me. And I think that's what is being offered here in this text.
I love it.
What about you when you read? I know it's always so interesting as somebody for whom this is a sacred text, trying to find your way in the Christian scriptures.
Yeah.
What do you see in this text that you find valuable?
You know, in the first part of this reading, it had me thinking, the pace of it, the sort of way that Mark just like steps down for a moment on something and then takes like sort of he jumps into something else.
Yeah.
Had me thinking about what my own life is preparing the path for.
Oh,
like
I love that.
If I were just a jumping off point, pointing towards something else, like I'm not the end point, but what am I pointing toward?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And now thinking about the way we were just talking about that, the last section of text, I think that resonates with it too, this idea that like what you are doing in your daily life, the day-to-day, how you spend your moments in your body on earth points to something. What does it point to?
Yes.
Does it?
Yes.
Yeah. What does it point to? What does it facilitate?
That is such a lovely way of reading this text.
It's a little, what's the word you use? Convicting? Like, oh, I don't know. What is on my schedule today? I don't know. But it's very compelling. And yeah, Mark is pulling my eyes to important places. So
yes.
So I appreciate that.
Yeah, I love that, Amy.
Okay, so next week, we're skipping a little bit, but not too much. We are picking up in Mark chapter 2, reading again about 20 verses, 1 to 22. I look forward to where Mark wants to draw my attention then.
Yes, it's a good text. As are they all. As are they all.
As are they all. Yes.
All right, Amy, well, have a happy rest of your birthday.
Oh, thank you.
I hope you get to do something other than clean your house.
Yeah, I'll find something else to do.
Yeah.
Have a great week. I'll talk to you soon.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us for this week's episode of BibleWorm. If you've enjoyed this free podcast, we hope you'll help us keep it going by joining our Patreon for as little as $4 per month. You can also sign up for other goodies like early access, video lectures, weekly liturgies, and more. Visit patreon.com/BibleWorm podcast for details.
BibleWorm is produced and edited by Bobby Williamson. Our theme song is sung by Colin Bagby, and our theme music is The World at Large by Dano Songs. Many thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping make this podcast possible.
Next week, we'll pick up with Mark chapter 2, verses 1 through 22. Until then, keep on digging.